have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Wyla, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, folks. You know, I almost decided to refer to today's show as light and breezy compared to past shows, and realized while that might be true, it's probably not an accurate reflection of some of the content today. That might make more sense as we get further into the show, but we've got a couple of different things I wanted to discuss that are really sort of interesting updates on things that we've talked about before on the show. So fasten your seatbelt, see how interesting this is to you. Hopefully it'll be good news or good information for you that you might be able to make use of yourself. Of course, I always like to start the show off by letting everyone know how to get in contact with me. The very best way to do that's through the website at therebelbroker.com. From there, you can send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have. Just click the contact button in the menu bar, and you'll be given an opportunity to do any of those things. While you're there, also take a moment to support the show. Go to the very tippy top. There's a red button that says take the survey to support the show. Answer the questions, and you're done, and you have helped the show. You've also submitted your name for the next $50 Amazon gift card drawing, which we tend to do just about every month here on the show, and we've given out quite a bit of money so far. I'm not sure where we're at, in the 600 plus range, somewhere around there. So congrats to the folks who've already won. Good luck to the folks who have not yet won, but will soon. So go ahead and head on over to the Rebel Broker, and it'll give you an opportunity to fill that out so you can take a swing at making that $50 work for you. All right. So one of the things that we've talked about here on the show quite a bit, the underpinnings of employment, right? And how, in my opinion, we're in kind of a place where we're going to see another revolution on par with the Industrial Revolution in terms of how the landscape of jobs changes. And when I say that, I'm thinking about that change from folks who needed to stop worrying about how to put shoes on a horse and started to learn on how to change tires on a car, that kind of stuff. Now, this time around, it's going to be different, and it's going to happen a lot faster. And it's evidenced by the driverless car, right? The automated car. A lot of pundits out there, and this is a topic, I think we touched on this a little bit last week with an update, have been estimating that we really weren't going to see much of this until 2030 or later. 2050, I think, was sort of the common one in terms of it being impactful. And you know, that just isn't going to be the way it goes. It's going to go a lot faster than that. And we've got some interesting articles that came out over the last week that absolutely point towards that. One of them actually not in a way that you would think. In fact, one article we're going to share today relating to this would indicate that we're not there yet, that this is something that will take much longer to get going. But it is, in fact, if you look at the reaction on the part of those who are going to make the decisions on whether or not this technology takes off, those folks are already calling it in a way that really kind of redefines the problem, or not doesn't redefine the problem, but refocuses it in a direction that I think is going to be interesting to see. Because if anything, the experience from this is going to accelerate automated driving. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. The other thing we're going to hit is we're going to do an update on pensions. We've talked a lot here about pensions. Because they're a huge economic deal. And one of the worst case scenarios that I suggested might be out there looks like it is actually being seriously entertained. And we'll cover that too. We'll probably do that one after the break. But for now, let's jump in and have a chat about the autonomous driving situation. Now, we talked about it because of the wide-reaching impact something like that potentially has. Whether we're talking about taxis, buses, long-haul trucks. Think about all the services that long-haul truckers consume as they go across the country. Everything ranging from fuel to food to showers to hotel rooms to whatever for those guys who don't want to sleep in the back of their rigs. Now, and I'm not saying this because I think that you should not embrace this. I think it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's actually going to make the goods that you consume cheaper in the long run. It just means that we're going to have a whole ton of people that used to drive for a living who aren't going to do that anymore, or at least aren't going to be able to do it and earn a decent living. And the very first folks who are going to get hit are these long-haul truckers. Now, this is an article that comes from Engadget. The headline is, Embark's, now Embark is the name of a company, Embark's semi-autonomous trucks are hauling Frigidaire appliances. The autonomous trucking company is making fridge deliveries from Texas. So this is already happening. This is not a suggestion. This is not an idea. This is already going. Let's see. The trucking company Embark to deliver smart fridges from Texas to California. The only time that it needs an actual driver, the entire autonomous part, is on the freeway, because there's no pedestrians. It makes things a lot easier. All it needs to do is stay in its lane, maintain speed, and keep a safe distance from other cars. That's really all that's important. There's no traffic lights, no pedestrians, and typically no oncoming traffic to deal with, right? Unless something really super crazy is happening. Now, level 2 autonomous semis will have a driver behind the wheel for insurance, of course, but once a rider driver drops the trailers at a designated spot in El Paso before the journey begins, Embark's systems will be driving it until the load reaches Palm Springs. From there, another rider driver will complete the last mile trip. The reason for this push is one of available manpower, or in this case, a steady decline of it. American Trucking Association estimated there could be a shortage of 175,000 drivers by 2024. The pilot program has already completed a handful of the 650-mile trips as of October, with more expected to follow. Someone involved in this says that this is the first time someone has demonstrated an end-to-end autonomous driving system for semis. Commercial trucking is ripe for innovation. Diesel maker Cummins announced an EV big rig in late August, and Tesla plans to launch its own alt fuel variant this week. Given the latter's pushes into autonomous driving, it isn't a stretch to think it'll have a self-driving truck on the road at some point in the future as well. And then, of course, there's Otto, Uber's self-driving truck company. So this is all happening at a pace. It's going to start going for a short period of time. Trucks will, before they enter a urban or their destination where they need to get off the freeway, they'll pull over and wait for a human driver to come and get on board and take care of all that driving in the streets. We've talked about this before in terms of the big thing for semis is the software, right? Once the hardware is on the vehicles to do what needs to be done in order to effectively drive, you're really set. But semis are a special case just because of how much more difficult semis are to drive around town. So the software is going to have to learn a lot more about how to drive vehicles like that on city streets, where it has to deal with the pedestrians and lots of sharp turns and all other kind of wonderful stuff. But that's one thing to show you that this is already happening. We are here at the end of 2017, and we are already seeing these trips to happen. By the year 2020, it would not surprise me if this is as common as running water, because it's just going to take off. Now, there's one other very interesting story that comes out of Las Vegas. Now, a self-driving shuttle was launched in Las Vegas, and it was involved in an accident less than 2 hours after its unveiling ceremony downtown. And most people would look at the headline for that and they think, oh, well, there you go. There's a setback for automated shuttles, right? For self-driving shuttles. Yeah, not so much, because when you read the article and discover what the conclusion is and what the city officials said, it wasn't the automated vehicle's fault. Quote, the autonomous shuttle was testing today when it was grazed by a delivery truck downtown. The shuttle did what it was supposed to do in that its sensors registered the truck and the shuttle stopped to avoid the accident. Unfortunately, the delivery truck did not stop, the one driven by the human, and grazed the front fender of the shuttle. Had the truck had the same sensing equipment that the shuttle has, the accident would have been avoided. Testing of the shuttle will continue during the 12-month pilot in the Downtown Innovation District. So what's interesting about this is the conclusion is that the problem was the human. The vehicle in this was not the problem. That's what the city is saying. That's what the city of Las Vegas is saying. So the folks behind this aren't looking for an opportunity to say, well, automation is too immature at this point for us to embrace it. Trust me, this will be the tip of an iceberg where high-density downtowns like the Las Vegas Strip are going to start pushing for this idea that only automated vehicles will be allowed downtown. Look for it to happen in places like Seattle, San Francisco, New York, maybe Miami, Los Angeles. I mean, any place that has a really intense downtown, maybe, Chicago. These are all cities that are going to be on the short list that are going to push for all automated driving in a downtown area based on issues like this, where the vehicle that's automated does the right thing, but the human in the equation does not. Because here's what else is going to happen. All of these accidents that are going to happen, right? Accidents are going to happen. But the vast majority of them are going to be human error. In other words, the automated vehicle did the right thing. The automated vehicle obeyed the law, did the absolute safest thing that could have been done in the circumstances it was put into based on the actions of humans. In fact, in other articles, you hear that the actions of the automated vehicle in this case may have saved lives and property damage. Since a collision did not occur, only a grazing occurred. If a human had been driving the shuttle, an actual accident may have occurred. Okay. According to this, and just as in terms of a little bit more info about the thing in Las Vegas, the shuttle makes a continuous loop in downtown Las Vegas and the rides are free. As an added incentive, AAA will donate $1 to the Las Vegas Victims Fund for every rider that boards the shuttle, assisting in providing relief and financial support for the victims of the mass shooting in October. They've already guaranteed a $100,000 donation. They're looking to make, and they come out and just completely say that, or at least the AAA folks do, the company sponsoring the shuttle said that 90% of deadly accidents occurring on the nation's roads are the result of human error. They aim to make roads safer with driverless options. And you have to kind of understand where all the fuel is behind this stuff, right? Follow the money is always my argument, right? If you want to figure out the motivations of organizations, politicians, anything, follow the money. Well, AAA, the insurance industry, the automotive insurance industry, has a huge lobby that gives lots and lots of money to lots and lots of politicians. Insurance companies want this technology out there. Insurance companies have dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and checked the math and realized that the amount of money they'll have to spill out will be dramatically reduced by the embracing of automated driving. So count on that happening. The reason that you have stop signs, stoplights, other rules of the road are because of insurance companies. Because rules need to be created so that we would know who to blame, who would be at fault in any given situation so that insurance companies could lay claims, right? So this is going to push through. The momentum is going to be behind this. And I think that we can all expect to see this happening faster and faster. And as we start to see more things happening in automation in that area, I think that'll just fuel the interest in other areas, particularly, again, follow the money, where you see fast food embracing the automation side of things as well. All right. So there's the update on that thing we tend to track that I think eventually plays into real estate in terms of the employment landscape for folks and what jobs might be out there for people. We're going to take a quick break. When we right back, we're going to talk about pensions. So don't go away. It's some creepy information. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408 852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. For the break, we were spending a little time reviewing some of the automated speculation that I throw around relating to employment and the change in the landscape of employment. I think that we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years, which I think is going to come quite a bit quicker than most folks estimate. Some of the folks who tend to be more right more often are estimating this stuff's going to happen a little bit sooner. In the second half of today's show, I wanted to give you an update on pensions. Pensions is a huge, huge deal. We've talked about it in terms of how it could easily be that thing that sets off a crazy domino effect that throws us right back into another downturn. The amount of money we're talking about here is ridiculous. And for those of you who aren't aware, I mean, if you want to Google it, pensions are basically Ponzi schemes where you guarantee folks a certain amount in their pensions based on the backs of people who were brought in later, right? So it's a pyramid scheme thing. It's that thing where if you get into Amway, you get lots of money based on you recruiting tons of people, right? Well, and the math only worked so long as for every individual who retired, there were what? I think the last number I heard relating to a firefighter union was there had to be 8 or 10 active firefighters paying in order to support one pensioner, and that worked. Well, of course, there's a virtually never-ending supply. As long as you keep hiring firefighters, or anyone that gets a pension, you're going to continue to create retirees drawing a pension. So at some point, because bummer for them, these folks are tending to live longer, I guess, than expected. There's going to be too many. And now for every, there's now several retirees collecting a pension for every one contributor. It's absolutely ridiculous. It never made any sense. It didn't make sense when folks got suckered into buying this idea the very first time they suggested it. But it's a huge element of tons of different unions. If you work for the government, a lot of different things. But these things are all going bankrupt. And for the ones that aren't going bankrupt today, they will go bankrupt eventually. What is nuts is, and what's particularly nuts is because remember, we talk about things that have the same net effect on policies, on economies, on populations as it relates to us and what we're going to be doing day to day. And on this show, obviously, we're focusing on real estate. So last time, if you try to divorce the specifics, right? Last time we had a huge problem because suddenly there was a drop in value. There was a huge indebtedness that was created based on the real estate market dumping, right? Well, you're creating the same kind of dynamic in the economy with a pension bubble. We've got a pension bubble. We had a real estate bubble. Now we've got a pension bubble. And the last time this happened, the government printed up tons of money and threw it at the banks. This time, what happens? Now, one thing that we've talked about some of the solutions that were suggested by various players in this field. And if you'll remember, I said none of those things will happen. There was one idiot that was talking about, I can't remember the state. Is it Illinois? That's bankrupt, that went bankrupt from their pensions, and literally 100% of every bit of taxes they collect goes towards the pensioners and nothing else is paid for. They're going into deeper and deeper debt. I think it was Illinois. I'm sorry if it escapes my mind at the moment. But in any event, there was this idea that the bordering states that the state would dissolve into the surrounding states, and then those states would take on that indebtedness. And like any state's going to agree to take on the stupid indebtedness of another state. It was a mentally defunct suggestion at the first suggestion of it. And all the other suggestions were all pie in the sky. My estimate was that eventually the federal government is going to guarantee these pensions. And if the federal government guarantees these pensions, we are screwed. Just ridiculously screwed, to the point where not only is this just bad policy, even if we did financially have the wherewithal to take on this indebtedness, this is the kind of thing that will screw us over, because they'll pay for this by printing up money. And that is easily in the realm of things that would throw us into another downturn. Okay. Now, I've got several articles. I've got a couple of specific ones relating to a couple of specific unions. I've got some more general ones. The first article we'll talk about is from Zero Hedge, referring to some other things. Pension bailout bill to be introduced this week. This is from November 9th. Over the past year, we've provided extensive coverage of what will likely be the biggest, most politically charged, and most significant financial crisis facing the aging U.S. population, a multi-trillion pension storm, which was recently dubbed one of the most heated battles of a lifetime. The reason, in a nutshell, why the U.S. public pension problem has stumped so many professionals is simple. For lack of a better word, it is unsustainable as a Ponzi scheme, in which satisfying accrued pension and retirement obligations requires not only a constant inflow of new money, but also fixed income returns, typically in the 6% plus range, which are virtually unfeasible in a world where global debt GDP is in the 300+% range. Which is why the good folks at Zero Hedge and many others have long speculated that it is only a matter of time before the matter receives political attention and ultimately a taxpayer bailout. According to Pensions and Investments magazine, Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio plans to introduce legislation that would allow struggling multi-employer pension funds to borrow from the U.S. Treasury to remain solvent. And when they say borrow, do not, and remember why this is so much worse, right? For those of you who haven't heard me discuss this before, we're going to talk for a second about the velocity of money. Yeah. Tune in for the sexy talk here on Real Estate Realities. Last time we did this, and we printed up hundreds of billions, creeping up to $1 trillion to solve the real estate problem. All that money was low velocity. None of it was going into a person's pocket to be spent on day-to-day items. It was going to banks, right? It was given to banks to fund folks buying homes, and that bank would then transfer that money to another bank. Right? Because people who are selling their home aren't usually walking off with that cash and spending it on day-to-day stuff. They're usually putting it into another home. That's the majority of the time. So by and large, it's very low velocity money. It doesn't, and velocity means it gets out there, it gets spent, right? And we're not talking about a bank to bank, because that insulates it from really a lot of economic influences. This is getting into the hands of people who we're talking about it not being spent on bread or water or car payments or food, any of that stuff, right? Any of the day-to-day stuff. So that's what was happening last time. None of that was high velocity. High velocity means it goes directly into someone's pocket and they spend it on stuff. They go and they buy a hamburger, they buy a new computer, they buy a TV, they pay their cable bill. That's high velocity money. And higher velocity money is much more inflationary. The money that simply gets digitally moved from Bank of America to Wells Fargo is not high velocity. The money that goes directly from the Treasury to your pocket via your pension fund has high velocity. So multiply the potential negative effect of bailing out pensions by a lot to get an idea of how much more impact it would have than the bailout of banks. Just to sort of get calibrated. Now, the bill is co-sponsored by another Democrat representative, Tim Ryan, also of Ohio. Could be introduced as soon as this week or shortly thereafter. It would create a new office within the Treasury Department called the Pension Rehabilitation Administration. The funds would come from the sale of Treasury-issued bonds, i.e., print money, right? That's what happens when you issue bonds. They issue bonds to cover the creation of money. The pension funds could the pension funds could borrow for 30 years at low interest rates. The one and painfully amusing restriction for borrowers is they could not make risky investments, which of course will be promptly circumvented in hopes of generating outsized returns and repaying the Treasury's bailout loan, ultimately leading to massive losses on what is effectively a taxpayer-funded pension bailout. Now let's rewind a little bit and remind ourselves of what a pension fund is. It is a Ponzi scheme. Barry Madoff went to jail for a Ponzi scheme, right? This is the world we live in, where you can do things that are functionally the same as committing a crime, but as long as you've done it as the government, nobody's going to jail. Now, there are tons and tons of unions that negotiated pensions, which was never a smart thing. It may have tasted like yummy, yummy candy when it first was instituted, but anyone who looks at this and understands how stuff works should have realized this is not sustainable. And what is really bad is if we do this bailout where we give them these 30-year loans to make these things right, we will never see that money again. You can, as the sun will rise tomorrow, you can bet that you will never see that again. And here's why. At least with the real estate bailout, real estate values eventually rose, right? Because that was the asset that was involved. There is no hope. There is no hope of that same thing happening with pensions. At least we got some of our money back, right? As these foreclosed homes started to get sold and all these other kinds of wonderful things happened, and as they held on to properties that then escalated in value and helped to sort of make things solvent again, that will never happen with the pension example. Ever. So make sure to kind of internalize that and realize that, you know, the idea of bailing things out may sound good from the standpoint of the folks on the other end of those pensions, but in terms of the national destruction and havoc it would wreak, not cool, not a good thing. Let's see. The bill would also fund a program at the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation to finance any remaining needs of pension plans borrowing from the new program. Any money needed for the PBGC would be a tiny fraction of what it would otherwise be on the hook for if Congress fails to act, said an analysis by Mr. Brown's office. Senator Brown's angle was naturally populist. So what should happen? Well, if we could collectively withdraw our heads from the dark place, we would simply say no more pensions. Pensions are over. If you are someone who is collecting a pension right now, you are owed money. We'll figure that out. But no new pensions. No one hired from today on will get a pension. Maybe we'll give you a 401k, something else. But once you stop working, there's no pension. There's no pension. Pensions are done. We don't do pensions. Quote, it's bad enough that Wall Street squandered workers' money, and it's worse that the government that's supposed to look out for these folks is trying to break the promise made to these workers. Not on our watch. We won't allow that to happen. Now, see, I tend to agree. Now, that's spoken by a Teamster in Ohio. And, you know, I tend to agree with this idea that promises were made, regardless of the fact they were stupid promises, regardless of the fact that they were promises that eventually would turn around and bite everyone. I get all that. Me as a taxpayer, that's not my fault. I don't know what remedies are out there. I mean, I know in some states, literally the state signed agreements that said the pension will be funded before everything else, which is what happened, right? And I can't remember, is it Ohio or Illinois that's bankrupt? Anyway, so they're legally bound to pay the pension before they pay anything else, which is what's happening. Let's see. Now the machinery for pension bailouts is finally in motion. We look forward to the next and possibly final tear in the American social fabric, that between workers who can't wait to retire to the generous pension promises and all those other unlucky taxpayers who will have to fund these promises. They break down. Let's see, why Illinois is in trouble. 63,000 public employees with $100,000 a year plus salaries cost taxpayers $10 billion. Mapping the 100,000 plus California public employee pensions at CalPERS costing taxpayers $3.0 billion. This is a huge nut to crack, and it is a national problem that's really not good news. And then there's another article here on another thing relating to sponsoring the bailout bill. I've got another article here. A bipartisan group of federal lawmakers from coal country have introduced an updated bill to use federal taxpayer dollars to pay for the broken promises of one particular coal mining union, the United Mine Workers of America. If passed, this bill would be the tip of a multi-trillion-dollar taxpayer bailout. President Trump, whose sympathy for the miners is well known, should beware, along with Congress. Let's see, there was one of these that had some interesting numbers I wanted to share with you because it's absolutely shocking. Now, this is from the Lombardi Letter. This is a site I discovered recently. Kind of liking it. It's pretty good. U.S. national debt already stands at, well, what's the date on this? November 10th, 2017. National debt already stands at $20 trillion. Quick background. Cities and state pension funds are struggling. They have more obligations than they have assets. We already covered kind of why these are bad things. Here's some perspective. South Carolina's pension funds, as of June 30th, they had a funding gap. In other words, between what they had and what they owe, or what their obligations are to pay, $25.4 billion. What's interesting to note here is that South Carolina's pension funds earned a rate of return of 11.88% over the past year. So they've broken all records. Remember, we talked about 6 to 8% was what most of them projected, and the actual amount that most pensions made, the average pension made something in the neighborhood of 2 to 3% over the last year. So this pension overperformed, and even in the face of dramatically stellar overperformance, they cannot meet the demands. Their funding gap increased due to more retirees collecting benefits and the cost of living rise. South Carolina's pension woes are just one example. Altogether, U.S. cities and state pension funds are underfunded by $3.85 trillion. And that's according to U.S. faces crisis as pension funding hole hits $3.85 trillion from the Financial Times in May of 2017. You also have to keep in mind that there's a huge demographic change happening in the U.S. The number of those entering retirement could be increasing immensely over the coming years. Now, let's talk about that. The second largest group in real estate that we talk about are the 50-plus folks, the 55-plus folks. There are tons of them. Many of them are these folks. The rate at which this group is set to grow is alarming when taking into account this particular phenomenon of pensions. Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio plans to introduce a bill. We already talked about that. Currently, the cities and state pension funds are underfunded by close to $4 trillion. It could get much bigger. So all of a sudden, the U.S. national debt could be surging by $4 trillion. Can you remember when we got up to $10 trillion under Bush? Everyone was freaking out because he more than doubled. We had this $500 billion deficit. In the course of 12 years, we then, over the course of 8 years with President Obama, we doubled it again, doubled it to $20 trillion. The pension fund crisis is worth keeping a close eye on. It would send gold prices soaring, and don't for a second think that the value of U.S. dollar won't get impacted. With higher debt, the U.S. dollar could face severe scrutiny and drop in value. So everything we just talked about would be the results of this. How do you prepare for it as a real estate person or someone who wants to invest in real estate? How should this affect you in your decision-making process? I think just be ready. I think that I don't leave cash so much laying around. If the value of that dollar is simply going to drop when this stuff starts happening, you're better off having that money invested in something that's going to help you earn more and more of those dollars. I think that it should light a fire under anybody, no matter what your thing is. Now, of course, our thing here is real estate, and I absolutely want to take the money that I am holding, that I have in cash, that I have in a 401k, that I have in other things. I want to migrate that over into invested in real estate, and through a self-directed 401k. We've talked about that. Do a Google search at my site, therebelbroker.com. Do a search of self-directed IRA. We talked about that. We did an interview with someone about that, and we've even got a couple of links to places where you can go and look into the possibility of doing it yourself. I think that is a smart move. I think that getting yourself into investments that will hold their value independent of money, right, is a smart move. And I think one thing that whenever you get into a tight economic situation, you always want to move towards things that will always be needed, and shelter will always be needed at one level or another. So something to keep in mind, I think, as we move forward with this. But this is all very creepy. I don't think it's going to be something that sneaks up on us. When this starts to get more seriously discussed, when it makes it through a few committees, makes it maybe through one of the two houses, this will become an unbelievable hot potato. So it won't be something that sneaks up on us, but absolutely should be something we're aware of. And of course, I'll keep you all aware of it here. Now, I hope that's been helpful for all of you. The goal, as always, is to leave you with more value in terms of the information I provide than you've invested in time. Absolutely hope I've achieved that today. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.